This is NDTV and you are watching NDTV Prime.
Hey, 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 hey.
Hello and welcome to this special episode where we're going to introduce you to a very, very special guest. I'm Akriti Tyagi. Robin Williams once said, "You're only given a very small spark of madness, you mustn't lose it." Our guest for today has performed at Broadway in New York to a standing ovation. The Huffington Post had this to say about him. He defies Indian stereotypes. He's a world-class global comedian whose material can be related to by any audience in the world, regardless of age, ethnicity, or background. He is not just an Indian stand-up comedian. He is an actor, a comedian of South Asian descent. His wit, however, is universal. He is the recipient of these prestigious awards: Asia's Best Stand-up Comedian, India's Best Stand-up Comedian. He is the first ever comedian from India to be invited for Just for Laugh Festival in Canada. He has also performed at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival and has been participating in the Edinburgh Fringe many times. He is also the first ever Indian comedian to perform at the Soho Theatre to a sold-out show. Please welcome Papa CJ.
It's so nice to see people coming into India and learning about our culture, because often I get to travel abroad and people don't understand us very much. Often when I meet people abroad, the first thing they say is, "Oh, you're Indian." I know about India. I've seen Slumdog Millionaire. That's like me saying, "Oh, you're English." I know about the English because I've seen Mr. Bean. Huh?
Thank you so much for being a part of the show.
It's my pleasure.
Okay, the question I'm going to start with is basically the one that I've been bugging you all about. How
Wow.
did the name Papa CJ come about?
So CJ is initials for my name. I've been called CJ since I was 16 years old.
Okay.
Now, when I started performing in London, try getting an English guy to pronounce an Indian name. They generally tend to mess it up.
And that would be?
Well, nice try. You know, the funny thing is, this is what I find, that curiosity is so powerful. It's the first question I'm asked at every single interview. And every time I'm asked this question, I try and make up the biggest story I can.
Okay.
To see if people will print it. Like press interviews, one of the interviews, and they printed it. I said I was born in the Vatican City, where it is customary to name a child after his or her physical characteristics. Papa is the literal translation of the Latin word massivus, and CJ is the literal translation of the Latin word genitalis. They have printed it. One more story I've given is that I saw a brutal mafia murder. I'm under a witness protection program from the International Court of Justice. But why the curiosity? One of the reasons I don't tell people my name is I don't want them to put me in a box. Why should they have to say, "Oh, Gujarati, oh, Bengali"? Why? Why the curiosity? So when I started performing in London, the Papa I just made up.
Okay.
You know, maybe subconsciously in my head I was thinking कि अंग्रेज़ों को भी लगना चाहिए उनका भी कोई बाप है. But in hindsight, I can tell you why it works. It's easy to remember, it's easy to pronounce, it's catchy, it kind of works as a brand. And if ever somebody is coming to try and find Papa CJ to kill him, then the only place you find Papa CJ is at a comedy club where there is security.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Makes sense. You're actually a Lawrence School and an Oxford University alum. How does somebody who's actually going to Oxford University progress towards comedy and takes it up as full-time profession?
Well, let's just say Oxford University is not exactly putting me on the brochure, right? They're not saying come spend 30,000 pounds on an Oxford MBA, you can be a stand-up comedian one day.
Sure.
I think what happened to me was that, you know, I was the youngest MBA on the Oxford course.
Oh, really?
And it was a tough year for me in that my dad was a tea planter, right? He started work on 825 rupees a month.
Yeah.
I had taken a loan of 30,000 pounds to do this MBA. So I remember that entire year, I used to look at Starbucks from outside. I never had the guts to walk in. I couldn't imagine how you could pay £2 for a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
I did more job apps than my entire course put together. And somehow I landed this job with IBM in the UK in the
Okay.
consulting business.
Okay.
And it took me 3-4 years to pay those loans back. But what happened at IBM, I went as this young 23-year-old MBA graduate who wanted to, you know, succeed and achieve in the corporate world, but they completely wasted me. You know, I spent a lot of time on the bench. Over 3 years, I had 6 different jobs in IBM. It was a large company, so I could move. And it was a hard time that time, in 2000 to 2003. So a lot of people were getting fired.
Yeah.
But because I got on with people, I was able to sort of get different jobs in parts
Sure,
of the country. But they completely killed all the ambition that I had. So after a few years of paying back these loans, I took a year off.
Okay.
And in that year off, I went to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival.
In
and I saw
2004, right?
2004, yeah, early
Yeah.
2004.
Yeah.
And I saw somebody doing comedy. I was like, wow, you know, here's a guy on stage, he's talking rubbish, and that's his job.
Yeah.
So that's when I was like, okay, dude, I'm going to give this a go. So I chucked up my job. 3 months later, I was on stage. I did 250 shows in my first 10 months. And yeah, I didn't look back.
Comedy is not even a registered profession in India.
It isn't.
Were there any tears or any fear from your parents or otherwise, you know,
See, my
relatives who thought that what is this guy doing after literally achieving, you know, according to Indian parents, you were there.
See, I will tell you this, that my parents are my greatest source of strength.
Okay.
They have always supported me. They've never ever tried to guide me and said, why don't you, you know, maybe a gentle nudge occasionally, but never. So when I was doing comedy, now they tell me, listen, we thought you'll do it as a hobby in 6 months time, like you'll leave it, but you just kept going on.
Yeah, yeah.
But they were always supportive. And my first 700 shows I did in the UK. After a year, I went broke. So I took up a job. I was working as a recruitment consultant in the day. I used to perform at night.
Okay.
Then one of my clients was a company called the Mind Gym. They do executive coaching. So I trained as a coach with them.
All right.
And it was fantastic actually. I would just say I'm free on so-and-so days, get me work. And on the other times I would get comedy. I would do comedy. But with those guys, I have trained Google in Ireland, Nike in Amsterdam, Deutsche Bank, Accenture in New York, Unilever in India, UBS in Zurich. So that was also interesting. And eventually that kind of picked up. Then I moved back to India. And this was 2008. There was no English language stand-up industry in 2008. And that's when it got interesting, because I remember a lady would ask me, an auntie asked me, beta, tum kya karte ho? I said, auntie, मैं comedian हूँ, मैं joke सुनाता हूँ. She's like, हाँ, joke तो मैं भी सुनाती हूँ. You know, तुम काम क्या करते हो? So that was the challenge.
Yeah.
I remember there was our domestic help, there was a girl who used to work with us. And my mother was trying to explain to her what I do.
Okay.
So she said, you know, Baba joker hai. And she said, वो joker कैसे हो सकता है? Joker तो 4 फुट के होते हैं. Because her concept was circus का joker.
Yeah.
But I think it was great to come back to India and start the comedy circuit, because look at it now, yeah, it's booming.
Yeah. You're actually one of the pioneers for the Delhi comedy circuit. You've
Yeah.
literally, you know, I mean, it's where it is because you helped nourish it.
Yeah.
Your thoughts about it?
I think I don't know if it was selfishness because I needed a place to perform, or me just wanting to grow the industry. I think it
Sure.
is the second.
Yep.
Because I had ample places for me to perform. But I remember we started, me and my friend Dipali,
Okay.
Dipali Gupta. We started in a small place called the Mocha Bar in Nehru Place. And I still remember the first show. We had Abhish Mathew, Raghav Mandava, Sanjay Rajora. All these guys did their first shows like in front of me.
Oh, wow.
And at that time I had called it Papa CJ Shaken and Stirred. And we were in we were inviting all kinds of performers because I didn't know how many comedians we would actually get.
Yep.
We had performance poets, we had singers, we had comedians. And I think what's really nice about specifically the Delhi circuit, which at that point I had a hand in shaping, is that it was a very supportive atmosphere. For me, it was very important to give the circuit a safe place to grow, because stand-up comedy is a very difficult thing to do. You get up on stage, nobody laughs, audience boos you, somebody says something mean, you will not get up again. So I wanted to ensure that we had that safe environment. I would host the shows, I would make sure the audience were, you know, nice and friendly. And I think that has helped shape at least the Delhi circuit, and maybe somewhere beyond. A lot of comedians from Delhi, Zakir and the like, have stepped out and they're doing really well. So I think those were special times on the circuit as well. There was a friendliness, there was a rawness to it, you know, something like we're starting something new. There wasn't this, nowadays it's all about Twitter and Facebook and social media and so many likes. Snapchats. But I think there was an earthiness to it which was special.
See, living in Delhi, I don't understand the language you speak in Mumbai. Like, sir, we call it bread, you call it pav. We call it pyaz, you call it kanda. We call it a servant quarter, you call it a 2 BHK. Huh?